Before we get into the stories, I'm excited to announce I have a new channel called Monster Trail Cams. Here's a quick trailer for my new channel. The link is below. Monster Trail Cams is your ticket to the unseen and supernatural. Sourced from a vast network of mystery hunters worldwide, our channel reveals a collection of strange creatures and supernatural events that will leave you on the edge of your seat. From shadowy figures lurking in dense forests to inexplicable entities prowling under the cloak of night, each chilling clip peels back another layer of the world's untold mysteries. We release new episodes several times a week. Okay, now let's get to the stories. People are scared of hitchhikers, but I'm telling you, there are worse things out there. I was just trying to get out of Harvey, North Dakota and move on south for the winter. I had been doing some farm work in North Dakota, but since it was late fall, most of that was ending for the year. I now had to get all the way to Florida for the citrus season, but I had more time than money, so I made me a sign that just said south and set myself up on State Highway 52. Interstates are better because you get truckers and sometimes they're bored enough to pick you up. Also, they're not usually as scared of strangers as your average Joe or Jane driving in their own vehicle. I knew I could be waiting there a while, so I just sat down and leaned back, propped the sign up against my feet. After a while, though, I smelled something awful wafting through the air around me. It would come and go, but when I could smell it, it was really strong. I looked around, but all I saw was the road, no roadkill, and a bunch of trees set back from the road a little way. I thought maybe it was my imagination. But then, I don't know if the wind shifted or what, because I smelled it again. Well, I've been hitching long enough to know when it's time to move on down the road, so I did. The trees continued along this part of the highway, but I didn't pay much attention to them. At least not yet, anyway. By now, it was early afternoon. I'd started out at 11 a.m. when I left the motel where I was staying in Harvey. I didn't want to start out too early since I'd paid for the room, but also because the morning was cold. I lugged my pack and my sign down the road south for a while. I hadn't seen many cars pass by so far, and obviously none of them had stopped at this point. Finally, I set the pack down again and sat back against it. I thought I must have moved far enough away from the smell, whatever it was. For a few minutes, everything was fine, and I had started to forget about it, but then it came back. Stronger, like death, rotting, stinking, foul death. I couldn't figure out how it had followed me. I looked around and saw the same things: road, trees, grass, no rotting animals, nothing. This time I decided I'd move on a bit farther. I'd even walk until I came to the next town if I had to. As I walked, though, the smell didn't go away, and I actually started to get nervous. How could a smell be following me? I was now really wishing a car would stop and pick me up. After an hour or so, I couldn't walk anymore. I sat down and tried to relax, but all I could think about was that death smell. As it started to get dark, I still didn't see anything. I really wanted to get in a nice warm car and get out of there. I didn't want to spend the night in the woods at all, let alone with whatever smelled that bad. I kept looking toward the woods, and just as the sun was going below the trees, I saw two red dots, what looked like red eyes staring at me from the shadows. I jumped up, grabbed my pack, and started walking again. I didn't think I had it in me, but I was walking fast. I waved my arms wildly every time a car passed, but they probably just thought I was crazy. None of them stopped. I watched the woods as I walked, but now couldn't see anything. Finally, I stopped and sat down. I had to. I was both physically and mentally exhausted. The smell was still there, but faint enough that I thought maybe I had been imagining it. Right then, I looked over to the woods again and again saw the red dots. But this time, I didn't see just the eyes. I watched as this creature started to step out of the shadows. Now I could see antlers above the eyes, huge antlers like on a big old buck. And then I saw the rotting flesh hanging off the face, which was basically just a skull. The body was bones with what looked like decomposing meat hanging off it. It stood on its hind legs, which were like deer legs, but it was taller than a deer would be if it did that. It was huge, like 9 or 10 feet tall. The grinning skull was the worst, though. Because of those eyes that were looking at me like laser beams, I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. Besides, there wasn't anywhere to go. The thing had been following me all day, I was now sure of that. Now that it was out of the woods, the death smell was really strong. It made me want to vomit, and I felt so sick I wasn't sure I could move. I felt like giving up. That thing was going to come out of the woods and kill me, eat me, whatever it was going to do. It kept walking toward me slowly, grinning and dropping bits of flesh like a zombie from one of those movies. It had that blank expression like one of them too. Blank and evil at the same time. The highway lights near us suddenly went out, like just blinked off. The moon was just a little sliver, and the nearest house was so far away I couldn't even see it. It was dark. Real dark. I couldn't see the thing now at all except its red eyes, but I could smell it, and I realized it wasn't making any sound at all. I couldn't even hear it walking, even though I knew it was still coming closer to me, slowly. I pulled myself up and started to stumble toward the nearest streetlight. I knew the thing was still following me, but I didn't know how close it was. Then I heard tires on the highway. I didn't care anymore. I knew this could be my last chance of getting away, and so I stumbled out onto the highway. I saw the headlights blinding me. I wanted to lie down, give up, but I reached my arms up and the truck miraculously saw me and pulled off the road and stopped. The driver then rolled down his window, but before he could say anything, I yelled, "Something's chasing me. Let me in, please." He sniffed the air for a second and said, "The Wendigo. Get in, quick." And that was that. That's the story of how I feel my life was miraculously saved by a stranger. I like to consider myself a pretty sensible person. I'm never too erratic or overreacting to situations. If I'm wrong, I take accountability for my actions. So I have no reason to feed into any conspiracy-fueled nonsense. What I witnessed this summer, after I retired from 30 years of fighting wildfires, almost scared me to death. It was something straight out of the horror films my kids love to watch so much. It was always my dream after retirement to move back to my hometown, right outside Fresno, California, near the river. I wanted to feel at peace in a slightly more rural area, while still being accessible to the city. I was still near my kids, able to see them at any time I wanted. My dreams of a peaceful life, fishing in my backyard, sitting on the porch playing Sudoku in the morning, were coming true. I could finally be at ease. The only fires left to fight coming from the stove after my cooking attempts. I closed on a home and started moving my things back and forth from Los Angeles. It was bittersweet, of course, as I had many friends there, who I wouldn't be right up the street from anymore. Then one day, my friend of 10 years started prying into my intentions for moving. They seemed to be pressed about Fresno specifically for some reason. I wasn't sure if it was due to personal experience with people or them just not wanting me to go. After beating around the bush, they got to the point that there's an old tale of something in Fresno that was really freaky, as they put it. Again, I'm a sensible person, so when I hear of tall tales, they don't faze me much. Not even pictures can always influence my opinion since we live in a technologically advanced society. Since we've been friends for so long, I still valued their opinion and understood it must be serious if being brought up. So I listened to their story of an old spouse whose family lived around the same leak I was moving near. One morning, while waiting for the school bus, he saw some crazy-looking thing running full speed on all fours. At this point, I was tuned out, not wanting to believe any recollection of something 30-plus years ago seen as a child. Children would say anything, I thought. The reality is children are more likely to witness supernatural beings and accept them as real because they haven't been conditioned to believe otherwise. I listened to them explain the psychological impact it had on them as a child. While empathizing, I could not see myself changing my mind about moving simply based on this. I understood my decision and respected it, saying they figured I would have to see it to believe it. Regardless, they helped me pack and sent me on my way. 3 weeks later, I moved in completely, ready to begin the rest of my life. At first, it took some getting used to. I was seeking the adrenaline rush from firefighting, which I missed so much. Normally a homebody, I found myself wanting to get out of the house more often. So, I started looking for new hobbies to try out. I found a painting class in town which felt perfect. 3 days later, I went to my first class, making a few friends right off the bat. We were assigned to do a freestyle painting session of anything of our choice. We had dividers between us to make sure every idea was original, and nobody could mistakenly feed off of each other's ideas for inspiration. We still had conversation, just not about what we were painting. I told him I was new to town, which sparked a million different conversations about the area. We talked about everything from good restaurants, good places to hike, and places to avoid. Even though we had just met, I felt that I could trust what they were saying. Their words seemed to come with wisdom and experience. Before I knew it, we had been talking for 25 minutes, and it was time to share what we painted. I went first as the newbie, showing the fiery scene of a forest fire being doused with water. I told the short story of its inspiration, explaining the recent end of my career. A few people later, a younger man showed his painting of a pale, naked being on all fours. Once again, I was faced with another story of someone with either first-hand experience or knowing someone who had seen it. I couldn't help but start to feel a little weird at this point. Everyone couldn't be lying. I was running out of excuses to not at least be a little scared of seeing this thing. I could no longer just blame a child's imagination for it. This thing was way more common than I expected. 2 weeks later, as I was sitting on the porch doing a Sudoku puzzle, something scurried through my yard. My full focus was on my puzzle book, but my peripheral still caught it. Frozen, I could not have moved if I tried. Of course, the creature was on my mind. I forced myself to stand up, trying to get a head start in case I had to run suddenly, grabbing my phone to make sure it was silent, to avoid drawing attention to myself. Then I stood there waiting to see if it would come back. I heard tapping noises, like someone chopping wood nearby or something. Then, there it was again. It zoomed across my yard so fast I could barely see it good. It was so human-like, yet no human could be physically able to move that fast on all fours. It wasn't furry or feathered like an animal, nor did it move like one. It made no sense whatsoever. Not only were its movements non-human-like, but its face looked like something out of Insidious. No human has fully black eyes with no pupils. Not that I had time to overanalyze its facial features, because by the time I saw the face good, I had dropped my book and ran in the house. I rented the house out immediately, moving back to Los Angeles for the time being. I told my friend what I saw, and all they could say was, "I told you so." I know someone out there will believe me. Before I saw this for myself, I thought anyone saying they saw a creature like this was absolutely crazy or lying. A few years ago, in the springtime, we had just broken ground for a new home in rural Maine. It's what would be our vacation home, close to ski slopes, a river, and a lake where we could bring the kids fishing, maybe even ice fishing in the winter. It took about 10 minutes to get to the closest store, which is the mom-and-pop convenience store that sells gasoline, sandwiches, slushies, groceries, etc. At the time, that was the closest store if you wanted to get something to eat. Otherwise, it was a 45-minute drive to the next big town that had McDonald's, KFC, that sort of stuff. When the construction crews were starting to frame the house, I would be over there pretty much every few days to see how things were going, and I'd always bring them lunch. Usually I grabbed a few subs and sodas. Well, on this particular day, when I walked into the mom-and-pop place, I see a sign that they were now offering fresh pizza. It already smelled amazing in there. It was still a little cool out, early spring, so I thought something hot for lunch would be great. I ordered a large pepperoni and a large deluxe pizza with lots of sausage on it. I grabbed some Cokes for them, put the pizza on the seat of my car, and headed to the lot. When I got there, the guys were working hard. They looked up and waved, looked at their watches. It's a little early for lunch, so I just hung out for a few minutes. Then we sit in random places around the lot to eat, mostly on tailgates, and a couple of us sit on these big rocks at the edge of the lot. There is nothing but woods in every direction of the clearing. Everyone says the pizza is really good. So that's good. Right about the time we finish eating, it starts to rain, like really come down. Clouds were expected that day, but the rain is really a surprise. The foreman starts swearing and tells the guys they'll wait it out for a bit. The guys scramble to get tools out of the rain, put them in their trucks. Everyone just sits in their cars and trucks while the rain beats down. Pretty soon it's obvious that it's going to be way too wet and muddy here, so the foreman tells the guys to just wrap it up for the day. Everyone drives off and I sit there a little longer, waiting for the rain to let up because I really need to pee. But there's just no break in that rain, it's just pouring. I figure I'll just dash to the edge of the woods, pee as quick as I can, then run back. I'm instantly soaked. I trudge a few yards into the woods and stop because there's too much brush to go any further. I figure nobody is around anyway, so I unzip and pee behind a tree. As I'm finishing, I hear the sloshing sound of someone walking toward me. I turn to see who came back, thinking someone had forgotten something. But there, at the opposite side of the lot, next to the half-framed house, there is this huge, hairy creature. Like, I'm talking Bigfoot. I'm completely not kidding, it's 100% a Bigfoot. I mean, unless it was the most realistic costume on Earth, like a Hollywood world-class makeup artist slipped into the woods of rural Maine and was then screwing with me. But I know it wasn't a costume. There's no way. And I could smell it. Seriously. The strongest and most unusual smell reached me from across the lot. This creature was at least 7 feet tall, and exactly the way everyone describes it. Long arms and legs. A face that is somewhat human and somewhat like a Wookiee. It had long, shaggy, dark brown hair, some of it hanging from his arms, and a huge hunk of it trailing down his back. This thing had apparently found the wet box of leftover pizza that one of the guys left behind on a rock when he dodged the rain. I know it is not a human in a costume, because then I actually see it eat, chewing loudly and completely scarfing it down like something or someone who hasn't eaten in a while. It devoured each slice quickly and ate like, I don't know, 7 slices maybe in under a minute. Then I watched as it wandered and sniffed around the lot like he was looking for more food. He found a can of Coke, sniffed it, then dropped it back on the ground. I was frozen in place, half hidden behind an oak but still getting completely drenched. However, the one good thing about the downpour is that it was keeping me hidden and therefore safe. My car was in the driveway, but the creature didn't seem to notice or care. It did want inside the house and stood on the new floorboards and looked around. All this time the rain is just soaking everything, and I'm so scared I can't even blink. Then a rush of wind started the rain swirling in a different direction, and that's when the creature looked in my direction and just stopped with its face towards me. I think he had gotten a whiff of me. He then picked up a long board from a pile and heaved it in my direction, just missing the tree. And then he took off. He ran fast through all that impossible brush back into the woods. It was only a moment or two before I lost sight of him. I didn't go back to the lot again for about a month. I rent it out now and tell tenants not to leave food outside because it could attract bears. Anyway, that's it. Not my ideal vacation house at all anymore. My wife seems to be more in tune with the supernatural realm and has seen and felt many ghosts over the years. Anyhow, I do have one experience that still haunts me to this day, and I think about it every once in a while. It's the early 1980s, and I'm in 10th grade. I play in the concert band, and we're doing a performance at the school one evening in the late fall. It all goes well, and I'm walking home by myself afterwards. I would say it's around 10 in the evening. The town that I grew up in has a bunch of walking paths. It's dark out, but the paths are well lit and perfectly safe. I was not on high alert at all, just happily moseying my way home like any other day. I'm almost home. Just one more gradual slope up a hill, over the bridge, turn right, And I'm there. I reach the beginning of the long uphill slope to the bridge, and I look up and stop dead in my tracks with an eerie sense of dread. It takes a few seconds to process why. There is a man standing at the top of the hill, probably 50 yards away just before where the bridge starts, and he's looking at me. It's not unusual to see other people along this path. It's fairly well traveled during the day. But it's night and there's no one else around, just me and this guy. Then I realize what made me stop so suddenly. I can only see his silhouette as the lights from the road behind him outline his shape. But he's standing there, akimbo, hands on his hips, and he's wearing a top hat. So all of this takes about a second to process, and I realize I'm just standing there at the base of the hill looking up at him. I can sense something that can only be described as pure evil. I know he's looking right at me, and for a brief moment I'm paralyzed. I can feel him looking at me. My rational brain takes over, and I'm able to step off the path and move behind some trees that block his view of me. I quickly go through my options. Keep walking up the path because obviously my mind is playing tricks. Either I saw something that wasn't there or it's just some guy walking his dog, right? Okay, so I slowly peek out from behind the tree and there he is. In the exact same spot, in the exact same stance. Still looking directly at me and still wearing that top hat. Oh, and did I mention the sense of pure evil piercing through my very core? Yep, still there. Option 2, run. Which is what I did. To this day, I still regret running away. It bothers me that I'll never know exactly who or what that was waiting for me at the top of the hill, right before the bridge. Did it really happen? In my mind, absolutely. But I can't be sure. If it happened today, I would run up the hill towards him just so I could find out what it really was. If I ever see him again, I will. But it's been over 30 years and still no sign of him.